At the end of this week's parasha, we have the story of the Megadef, translated as the Blasphemer, also known as the Mekalel, the Cursor. So it's a fascinating story, written in a very cryptic way. B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to go through the story, ask a couple of questions, look at some midrashim, and maybe try to see a bigger picture in one of the deep lessons in the Torah. So the parasha starts off, this is Perek Kavdalet, Pasuk Yud, 24:10, says the Pasuk. New story. Vayetze ben ish Yisraelit, and the son of a Yisraelite woman, a son of a Jewish mother, vehu ben ish Mitzri, and this same guy whose mother is Jewish is also the son of an Egyptian man, betoch bnei Israel. So the guy went out into the Jewish people, vayinatzu b'machane ben ha-Yisraelit v'ish ha-Yisraeli. And this son of this Jewish mother gets into a fight with an ish Yisraeli, with what appears to be a full Jewish, meaning from both sides, mother and father. Vayikov ben ha-isha Yisraelit et Hashem vayikalel, and this ben ha-isha Yisraelit, the son of the Jewish mother, is Vayikov. He makes a hole in God's name, or they translate it here in the article. He pronounces the name, and then Vayikalel, he curses the name of God. He blasphemies. He curses the name of God. Vayaviu oto el Moshe, and they brought him to Moshe. V'shem imo Shlomit badivri lemateh Dan, and his mother's name is Shlomit, the daughter of Divri from the tribe of Dan. So what happens next? Vayanichuhu b'mishpar, and they put him in a jail. It seems to be that lifrosh lahem al pi Adonai. It seems to be that Moshe didn't know what to do. This is one of the four places they say that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know exactly what to do. By the Adonai Moshe Emor, and God speaks to Moshe, Hotzeh mekalel el michutz lamachane, v'samechu kol hashom'im et yedehem al rosho, v'ragmu oto kol ha'edah. He says, take him out of the camp, and everybody put their hands over his head that saw what he did, and they'll stone him to death. And they'll b'nei Yisrael tedaber le'emor, and speak to the Jewish people, saying, Ish ki yekalel Elohav ben asah heto, and tell the Jewish people, anybody who curses God shall bear his sin. V'nokev shem Adonai mot yumat, ragom yirgemu vo kol ha'edah kager ka'ezrach berogvo shem yumat, and anybody who pronounces God's name in a cursing kind of way will be put to death. And then it goes on. Anybody who strikes somebody else mortally in a way the guy's going to die, mochumat, that person will be put to death. Then there's a whole group of listings of all the, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If you hit somebody, hurt somebody, you gotta measure for measure, which really means money in these kind of cases. So all these damage laws. There should be one law for you, to the convert, to the native alike, for I am the Lord your God. And the Jewish people, and Moshe told the Jewish people to do, they did exactly what Moshe said, like God commanded, and they stoned the cursor to death. Okay, so a couple of questions on this whole story. First off, so we have a story, a guy curses God really bad, gets into a fight with another guy, curses God, and Moshe doesn't know what to do. So one question is, why doesn't Moshe know what to do? And then Moshe asks God, puts him in jail, asks God. God tells him that someone who curses God, curses the name of God, is subject to death. Then there's this whole section of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, like don't hurt somebody, if you murder somebody, if you hit somebody, like damaging thing in the middle. And then it says, and Moshe told the Jewish people, God said, and they stone the cursor, the blasphemer. So the question also is, why this middle case, does it have this whole damage laws in the middle? Okay, those are some basic questions. Also, there's no real names over here. We have the guy who cursed, who's the son of a Jewish woman and an Egyptian man, and the guy he fights against is a totally Jewish guy. There's no real names till we get to his mother's names, which after the story, after he curses, it says his mother's name and her tribe. But again, it's a little bit funny. So a little bit side for chinuch laws. So some commentators come down and say, oh, you see over here the power of education, and they're going to blame a lot on the mother, which we'll get into the mother in a second and what she did, what she didn't do. But he's always known as the Ben Isha Yisraelit. He never has an actual name, as opposed to the other guy who is an Ish Yisraeli, still no name, but he himself is personally Israeli. Okay, so that's like one little idea. Now, let's look a little bit at Rashi And I think if we look at Rashi, a little bit of the midrashim, we'll get some of the bigger background to the story of who this guy is, what's going on, and maybe that'll answer some bigger questions. So let's start with Rashi. Says Rashi on the very first pasuk, Vayetze ben isha Yisraelit, and the son of this Israelite man went out. Vayetze. So Rashi quotes the Midrash Rabbah, says the Midrash, Me'echad yatza. Where did he leave from? Vayetze. Where was he coming from? Rabbi Levi Omer, says Rabbi Levi, Me'olamo yatza. He went out of this world, which means that he committed a sin right now for which he's going to have to die, or for which he loses Olam Haba, or he just gave up hope, and that's going to be the punishment for what he did. That's one opinion. Rabbi Brechia Omer, says Rabbi Brechia, Mi parasha shenamala yatza. He's coming out of the very last section in the parasha. The section right before this section spoke about the lechem hapanim, the bread of faces in the Beit HaMikdash. There were 12 loaves of bread that were baked every week right before Shabbat, and then on Shabbat itself, the Kohanim would remove last week's bread and replace it with this week's bread. And last week's bread they would all split amongst each other, and there was a miracle that the bread was always fresh, and that was the bread, the lechem hapanim, that was on the shulchan in the kodesh, in the holy in the Beit HaMikdash. So says the Midrash, opinion number 2, where was he leaving? He left this parsha, meaning it's about this parsha. And says the Midrash, ligleg, he made fun of this mitzvah. Ve'amar, and he said, b'yom HaShabbat yarachenu, on the Shabbat, they're gonna arrange it. Derech hamelech le'echol pat hama. It's the way of the king to eat fresh bread. Here in Israel, as well as those Europeans out there, also fresh bread is like a very big deal. You have to have your fresh pita, your fresh lava. There's not so much preservatives. We don't want that stale old bread. I know you people in America, you're into the older bread, but here in Israel, we like the fresh bread. Here also says this cursor of God. He says, it's the king eats fresh bread. How could Shema pat sonen shetish ayamim? Can it be that a king's going to eat 9-day-old bread? Because from the time they bake it on Friday and until the time they eat it afterwards, a full 9 days are going to go by. So he says, how could this be? So that's opinion number 2. Opinion number 2, he makes fun of this mitzvah of the 12 breads. And opinion number 3 says, Mi beit dino shel Moshe yatza mechuyav. He went out of the court of Moshe Rabbeinu chayav. He lost the court case. What's the court case? Bali ta'ohalo. He came to pitch his tent betoch matei Dan, in the tribe of Dan. Amar lo, they said to him, what are you doing over here? Why are you in the tribe of Dan? Amar lahem, mi bnei Dan ani. I'm from the tribe of Dan. Amar lo, they said to him, Ish al diglo b'otot leveit avotam. Each person, the way the houses work and the inheritance works and the land works, it goes based on Beit Avotam, on the house of the father. And basically, your father wasn't Jewish; he was an Ish Mitzri. Your mother is Jewish from the tribe of Dan, but you yourself are from Ish Mitzri. So therefore, based on the pasuk, you don't get inheritance. Nichnas levei dino shel Moshe. So he went to Moshe, the court of Moshe. He said, it's not fair. I want to pitch in the tribe of Dan like my mother. And they said, no. The court said, you're wrong. The people are right. You're not from the tribe of Dan. Your mother is, but it goes by the father. Therefore, go pitch your tent outside with the converts and with the Eruv Rav. But you yourself don't have a right to the land of Dan. Amad v'gidef. And when this happened, he got up and he blasphemed, he cursed the name of God. Okay, so I want to focus a little bit primarily on the third explanation that he's fighting for the tribe of Dan. But in general, so what's going on here? You have yourself a guy whose mother is Jewish and whose father is not Jewish. So why is his father not Jewish? What took place over here? So if you go back to the Midrash, and actually if you look at Rashi brings down all these midrashim beautifully. But if you go back to the Midrash, so the Midrash says that his mother Shlomit Bat Tivri was the only person to sleep with a non-Jew in the whole time in Egypt. One of the reasons we were saved in Egypt, they said, was because the husbands and wives, they were so faithful to each other. So that's one of the main reasons why we made it out okay with no problems. That's one of our big zechuyot, our big merits to leave Egypt to begin with. But there was one one person who didn't, who at least from this Rashi over here in the parasha, who seemed to have sinned and slept with a non-Jew, and that was Shlomit Bat Tivri. And Rashi says that's why her name is said explicitly to praise the rest of the Jewish people. She's the only one who was a prostitute. That's how Rashi writes it over here, and she's the one that conceived this guy with an Ish Mitzri. Okay, so on the one hand, this guy's like pretty torn, like what's going to be with me? Am I a Jew? Am I not a Jew? It's actually fascinating. If you look at the Rishonim, there's a whole halakhic discussion. If your father was not Jew, in the old days before the Torah was given, it went by the father, not the mother. Once the Torah is given, our halakha is that it goes by the mother. But the question is, somebody who this is before Matan Torah, maybe the law would be different. And there's this whole long discussion in the Rishonim that this guy have to convert or not convert. And it's fascinating how those laws would work out. But let's go according to our mainstream halakha, that he actually is Jewish from his mother, but still it's complicated because the father wasn't Jewish. And we see he's getting into a fight with another guy over property, and he loses in the court, because in the actual court, property, inheritance goes by the father. So even though he's Jewish, it's still a little bit of debate. You're Jewish, but you don't get land. Go hang out with the converts, and it gets complicated. You can tell this could be difficult for him. And maybe the first shot in the midrash is like he lost hope because, what am I? I'm not, even the Jewish people don't fully accept me. According to the second shot of the bread, so I heard a beautiful idea that the bread itself, you have 12 loaves of bread in the Beit HaMikdash, symbolizing the 12 tribes, one loaf for every single tribe. Now him being kicked out of the tribe of Dan, saying you really aren't part of this tribe, he kind of felt he felt he was out of the unity of the Jewish people. That's probably maybe the second approach, which relates to the bread, is kind of saying that I'm not part of the Jewish people, symbolized by not being part of the loaves. I'm not part of the tribe of Dan. That's why he curses. But the third approach is that he actually got into a fight with the tribe of Dan over inheritance, and he lost. Okay, let's get a little bit more into the details of the story, and we'll stick with Rashi by us. But if you open up, actually, you know what? Let's stop for a second. If you who is the Ish Mitzri? So the midrash says, who was this father of this guy? So the midrash looks back and says, there's really only two other times when we find this concept of an Ish Mitzri in the Torah. The most famous time we find the Ish Mitzri is the Ish Mitzri who was beating the Jew back in the book of Shemot. If you go back to the first parsha of Shemot, all the way in the beginning, in Perek Bet over there, it said one day, Moshe went out, he got old, he went out to his people, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Jew, and Moshe Rabbeinu sees what happens, and he kills the Egyptian. Okay, says Rashi, and that Egyptian is called an Ish Mitzri. Says Rashi, here by us, Hua Mitzri Sharag Moshe. This Mitzri that Moshe killed back then, that's the father of this guy who cursed right now. Which this might answer another question, which I saw a couple commentators bring down. This answers the question, why did Moshe not want to give the Psak Din? Why does he ask God what to do in this case? Because Moshe killed his father. So Moshe is Nogea B'davar. He can't be a judge in this case. He has to take a step back and say, listen, let God decide. I'm already intermixed in this whole story because I killed your father. People are going to say, oh, I killed the father, now I kill the son. Moshe's like, I'm not getting involved. If you actually remember Rashi back then, it's funny because Rashi back there said, and Moshe looked back and forth, he saw that no converts was going to come out of him. But what are you talking about? This kid already came out of him. So I say, yeah, but this kid was already conceived before the story took place, and that's why Moshe could kill the Egyptian back then. But if you open up the midrashim back in Shmot, the Midrash Rabbah over there tells a much longer story. And actually you can find it by the Midrash by us as well. And there's a little bit conflicting facts. But say the Midrashim, you'll find this in Midrash Rabbah, you'll find this in the Tanhuma, you're going to find this in the Yalkut Shimoni, you'll find it, and basically all the Midrashim are going to bring down some version of this Midrash. Says the Midrash over there, who was the Ish Mitzri and who was the Jew he was beating up? Says the Midrash, the Jew he was beating up was one of the Jewish slaves who actually was a taskmaster. He was an Egyptian that was in charge of the Jewish leaders who were in charge of the Jewish slaves. The way it worked, there was a tiered system in Egypt, and when there were slaves, you had the slaves that were working, you had certain slaves that were on top of them who were in charge of them, and then you had yourself the Egyptian taskmaster who would beat the Jew and make them work. And they would say that the Jew that was on top of the slave Jew, the harder working Jew, that Jew in between used to take the beatings when the slave Jews, when the ones that actually were working didn't get enough grain, didn't make enough hay, enough bricks. So the ones that would get hit first were the Jews that were like on top of them. But fine. So one of those Jews that was like the middle management Jew in the slavery system, still a slave, his taskmaster. So one day the wife of that Jew, who they say that wife was Shlomit Bat Divri, came out to go see her husband, and says the midrash, she was known as Shlomit Bat Divri because she used to say shalom to everybody. And she was Divri, she used to always speak to everybody and say hi to everybody. And the midrash learns it in a little bit of a flirtatious way. And one day, when she came to say hi to her husband, she also said hi to the Egyptian taskmaster, this Ish Mitzri. And she caught the Ish Mitzri's eye. And one day the Ish Mitzri told the guy, go to work. When the Jewish guy went to work, the Mitzri snuck into the house, and now, depending which midrash you read, either he seduced her, he tricked her, it was dark, she didn't know, or he raped her, or she did it willingly. So it's not so clear from the midrashim. It seems from the Rashi by us over here that it seemed to be a little bit more willing. It seems from other midrashim that it was more rape. But whatever did take place, this Mitzri slept with her, and she conceived. And who was born from that union? That would be this guy in our parsha right now who curses God. Now, if you go back to our story, so the Egyptian, the Ish Mitzri, after he sleeps with the woman, he walks outside and he sees the husband saw him coming out of the tent. So the Egyptian knows the husband saw him. So what does the Egyptian do? He starts beating the husband, wants to kill him. That's when Moshe walks in, and Moshe says, not only did you rape his wife, now you want to kill him too? And that's when Moshe kills the Ish Mitzri. The next day, Moshe sees two Jews fighting with each other, and the two Jews look at him, and Moshe says, why are you guys fighting? So they said, are you going to kill us the way you killed that Egyptian? The Rashi over there, read the midrashim over there on the exact language, they learned from there that how did Moshe kill the Egyptian? Through using God's holy name. So even though it said they hit the Egyptian, it said he hit the Egyptian with God's holy name. And now in our story, when this son of the Ish Mitzri is so upset, what tribe am I? What tribe am I not? Who am I? What am I all about? Who does he curse? He curses that same name of God that led to the death of his father. Okay, and who were the two people fighting? Just as a side point, who were the two Jews that were fighting? So they say, oh, it must be one of those Jews that was fighting was the guy who Moshe Rabbeinu saved, because that's the only other guy that knew that Moshe used God's name. And who was that, according to the Midrashim? Datan v'Aviram. So it actually was Datan, and Datan is fighting now with Aviram. So the husband of Shlomit, the Jewish husband of Shlomit Bat Divri, is Datan. And if you want to go with other Midrashim, who's the Ish Yisraeli, who's fighting with him for inheritance, that's Datan's son, either from a second marriage or from Shlomit before, but the full Ish Yisraeli would be the son of Datan, fighting with his stepbrother, this son of the Ish Mitzri, and they're fighting over inheritance and over land, and that's why the guy's cursing now in this parasha. Now, I do have a bit of a side question. I already can find the answer. Dan is known as Masef Kol HaMachanot, the tribe that's supposed to take in all the extra stragglers, as we said in previous Divrei Torah. So I'm not so sure why Dan wouldn't accept him in over here, especially if the mother's from Dan. Even though, but I guess Halakha straight says no, there is no inheritance. Maybe you can pitch your tent right next to the tribe of Dan, but the actual land itself you couldn't get. But if anybody could have a better answer of that, because it's actually the one tribe that should be letting people in. Although the name Dan I saw is also from the language of Din, and like they're very much into the justice and the strict justice and the judging. So that's why they're taking him into court over the exact letter of the law. Okay, let's go back to our parsha now and look at it now again with new eyes. So you have yourself this guy who's like, who am I? What am I all about? Am I Jewish? Am I not Jewish? My mother's Jewish, but my tribe is not. Gets into a fight with his stepbrother over inheritance and basically goes to court and he loses. And then the Torah has this whole section of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hitting each other. It's interesting, this parsha of the hitting and these laws of hitting, if you go back to the story of the two Jews hitting each other and the Egyptian hitting Datan, it's very similar language. The Vayinatsu, the whole fighting is in, that word is in both places. Vayetze would be in both places. So the actual language in the Ish Mitzri, the language is similar in both areas. So there's a little bit of a connection of the hitting. There was hitting over there that started that story. They bring the hitting back up over here. But I heard an idea that the message actually is a little bit straighter. What's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, the damaging? What does it have to do with anything we're talking about? With and why does the story doesn't go into all those details? It just tells you have a guy who has an identity crisis. On the one hand, he's a Jew. On the other hand, he's not fully accepted. The Torah, and if you have the background, for sure you see how this background is even more difficult. The Torah is trying to teach you a lesson. This guy over here is the guy you're supposed to feel the worst for. You're supposed to sympathize with him. Look at this guy. He just wants to pitch his tent next to his mother and his mother's tribe, and the tribe kicks him out. He goes to court, and the halakha is against him. He doesn't get the land. You feel bad for him. And what does he do? His father was killed, and life is difficult. So what did he curse the name of God that killed his father? He's cursing a situation. He lost hope. You feel bad for him. But what's the punishment? The punishment is still death. You can't curse God's name. Your background, your history, where you come from, there are still some red lines you can't cross. That's the eye for an eye. That's the tooth for a tooth. It says the same law for a Jew and for a convert. Life is difficult. We all have our baggage where we come from. We all have our background. But that will not justify crossing the red line. You cross the red line, the punishment will come as the punishment is supposed to come. If we could close with one last idea, there's one other person called an Ish Mitzri earlier on. And who is that? That's Moshe himself. We said the other story where Moshe kills the Egyptians starts with the same language, but there it's Vayetze Moshe. Moshe went out. Moshe has a very different background than this Mekalel. Moshe grew up in the palace of Paro. He grew up basically as a half Egyptian. He too is half Egyptian, half Jew. But with him, the Egyptian part, that's what was, he was on top of the world. He was in charge. You read the midrashim over there. He was basically like second in command to Paro. He had everything going well for him. And then when he went outside one day to see his brothers, the Jewish people, because it seems to be, unlike the movies, it seems to be that Moshe knew that he also was a Jew, even though he's living in the palace, and he went out to see his brothers. And he saw an Egyptian hitting a Jew, and he stepped up and fought for his brothers. He fought for the people that he knew. He made a statement, and in that statement, when he killed that Egyptian, he lost his whole life. He gave it all away to do what he thought was right, even though it'd be much easier to not do that, to stay rich and powerful and famous and in charge of Egypt. He also probably could justify it and say, oh, look at these stupid Jews, these slaves, they're not working hard enough. The taskmaster is probably right. And he could probably justify not helping whatsoever. But he made the choice over there. No, the Jewish part of me, that's what makes the most sense, even if it's going to cost me everything. And ultimately, it did cost him everything. And Moshe has to run away. And then, after he runs away, he makes it to the well where there's the benot of Yitro, and he helps Yitro's daughters. And when Yitro's daughters go back to tell Yitro the whole story, he saves them. Now, according to the simple pshat, this happens maybe right away, but according to midrashim, many years have gone by. Moshe has been wandering around, but Moshe now makes it to Yitro and Yitro's daughters, and he saves them. And when they refer to Yitro, when they refer to Moshe, they call Moshe an Ish Mitzri. Who saved you? How did this all happen? Oh, you know who did it? It was the Ish Mitzri who did it. So on the one hand, it's a very sad story, because on the one hand you can say, oh my God, Moshe made the biggest choice in his entire life to choose to be a Jew and not an Egyptian. And the very next day, the Jews basically are like, are you going to kill us too? And they basically realize they don't care about him. And these brothers that he fought for don't fight back for him. And now he runs away. And when he finally sees this new family, the first thing he's called is an Ish Mitzri. So you see, life's not going so well for Moshe after making that choice. But there's a midrash that says a little bit different. The midrash says, why is he called an Ish Mitzri here? Because when they asked Moshe, where'd you come from? How did you help us? He goes, you should know. It all happened because of the Ish Mitzri. That Ish Mitzri that I killed, that got me to here right now, even though it caused all those hardships and those difficulties, right now I'm here today to help you because of all those hardships and difficulties, and that's why I can do this mitzvah right now. The total opposite approach to the son of the Ish Mitzri that we have in this story. So I guess the lesson is, life is difficult. We all have our baggage. For some, life is a little bit easier in the beginning, gets harder later on. For some, it's harder earlier on, gets maybe easier later. This guy had it hard, had it very difficult, and he can have every reason to justify why he's cursing God and look the other way. But ultimately, says our parasha, you cross the red line, you got to get punished. Shabbat shalom.